Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. That brings us to that title, which has been designated by Criterion at spy number 1130. This is the work from the year 1971, and the name of the filmmaker is Gordon Parks. And the name of the work is Shaft. This is the work from the year 1971, and it is based upon the work by Ernest Heidemann, and it is from that brilliant Renaissance filmmaker, artist, Gordon Parks. And it has, among its great cast, we have the one, the only Richard Roundtree as Shaft. Yes, so this is such an exciting, thrilling, funny, suspenseful, action-packed film that has so much going for it, and indeed one of the great strengths of this release from Criterion, and indeed many other Criterion Collection releases, this being a great example, is how this also shows us and shows me how this film is operating on so many different levels at once in terms of the characterization of Shaft, the positioning of Gordon Parks in this type of high budget filmmaking mode, and creating this film set against the backdrop of many parts of New York City during the early 1970s, while always maintaining a sense of consciousness and conscientiousness, being conscientious too about the importance of the portrayal of Shaft, John Shaft, and the look and feel, and also the confidence, and how much this resonates, not just as an action film, not just as a type of mystery or mystery film, but also as a film about or concerning representation, race representation, and also the depiction of race relations embedded within the film itself. And it is an enthralling, exciting, and truly entertaining work. Again, operating on many levels at once. This is the Gordon Parks work that is Shaft. So, if we were to try to focus on the plot or story of this film Shaft, we are dealing with the private detective, private investigator character Shaft, who is living in New York, and he has quite the character. He has quite the suave nature to him. He's also so rugged and so confident. And he is tasked, or he is trying to figure out this situation involving a Harlem mob boss. This is the bumpy character, Moses Gunn character, and what he says in terms of what's going on with his family, his daughter. But this leads to further sort of embroilments and further entanglements, shall we say, that involve maybe a type of turf war, faction rivalries between and among different mob elements, both in various parts of the city, and also the Harlem mob element, and then the Italian mob element, and then we have the way in which other characters figure in to these developments, these entanglements that lead to John Shaft trying to go from place to place, straddle the line, go into sort of different various worlds that are depicted here against the landscape landscape of New York City, not only do we have the sort of the undercurrent of the mob presence in one aspect of the city, and also in different aspects of different parts of the city, depending on what faction we are dealing with. We're also dealing with other elements of the community, other people, other characters that John Shaft meets that have their own, say, concerns that might be said to be on a maybe on a sort of a socio-political level in terms of the betterment of the community, or a type of expression of rage or disillusionment against a certain maybe a social political climate as a type of nuanced undercurrent that's going on. We also have the way in which John Shaft is trying to deal with the authorities, the police, and this becomes yet another source of say, tension that exists. But John Shaft never loses his cool. He is always on top of things, no matter what world or what area he enters into in New York. And it is a city that, as one knows, is filled with a lot of differing areas, different worlds within the geographic scope that is New York City. No matter where John Shaft finds himself, he is always cool, he is always on top of things, he is always heroic, and he never lets us down. And that is true in terms of what he does, and in terms of his profession on the job, as it were, and also the downtime, the private time. And also we understand that John Shaft is so suave, and he is so attractive, and he also enjoys the company of the ladies as well. So overall, this becomes a great action set piece. This becomes a great introduction to this larger than life character, John Shaft, and this becomes a lovely sort of maybe look into the gritty nature of various parts of New York during the early 1970s, which also reminds us too about the keen eye of Gordon Parks, and how he and his photography sensibilities as well. We are reminded about his groundbreaking work with Photography and Life magazine, etc. But how this could be said to be a type of way in which his photographic eye is capturing a type of true to life feeling of the streets of New York, the look and environment of New York that might not have necessarily been on display in a lot of the other quote-unquote mainstream Hollywood films leading up to 1971 in Shaft. And so in many ways, this film is eye-opening and it's groundbreaking to a number of the audiences that saw this film. And indeed, this enjoyed a lot of success in terms of critical and popular success. So this is a reminder, too, of a type of, I don't want to say cinema verite per se, but it is a reminder too of the importance of the look, the photograph element that is also on display in a work like Shaft, and so that cannot be denied. And you see that, and you feel that, and you hear it, and you smell it, and you touch it when you see this film, and that is so great. Now, I mentioned to see and hear, and another aspect that is very important is the music. The music is a character too in and of itself. It is like a type of Greek chorus character that is maybe like a type of call and response relationship with the image that is ongoing. It is also a type of inner monologue of John Shaft himself, and also maybe to a commentary, a running commentary on the situation at hand, both in terms of the interior states of the characters that we have, and also the socio-political states of the situations and the environments that are depicted as the action of the plot goes forward. And therefore, when we speak about the music of the work, we have to mention Isaac Hayes. And this becomes so integral, so important, so fundamental to the very heart and soul, the beating heart and soul and identity that is here in the work Shaft. So, and it's so great too because the Criterion release here goes into other avenues and supplements, talking about many aspects of the film, including the music. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the latter half of this video discussion about the supplemental materials. But needless to say, this is a very key and critical aspect of the success of this film, namely the way in which sound and music are really responding to and echoing and mirroring and also commenting upon what we see before us, and going back to the image, going back to the actual the story, and also the presence, the landmark status presence of this larger than life figure Shaft. I mean, we have to say that the look and feel, the sound, the energy, it is due to many things. One of the key components of this, of course, is the performance by Richard Roundtree as Shaft. And that look, I mean, there, we'll talk about this maybe in the discussion a little bit later in this video, but things down to the leather jacket, or the look that he has when he's doing some specific action scenes, confronting some sort of villains in a particular scene here, or when he has a different type of jacket doing his sleuthing mode. And these are so iconic, so cool. So that's one aspect. Also the way in which he has his mustache, and the mustache too became a little bit of an issue during the production preparations of the film, as the supplemental materials reveal to us as well. But that also becomes a part of the icon status, and too the way in which he is so suave. He is such an action hero. He is so confident, and he is this hero that people can look up to, and that he is just it's larger than life. And another aspect that is revealed in the supplements is just how important the character of John Shaft is in terms of perceptions of race in cinema, representations of race in cinema, and also audience expectations, and how this coincides with a lot of other representations that were seen in other examples of cinema during the early 1970s. So this is a great example of this. And ultimately, too, it is a super entertaining, thrilling action film that has many different facets. It goes in many different directions, and twists and turns galore, really, and a whole lot of fun along the way. What a great film this is, and what a great entry into the physical media catalog. Wow. This is great. 1971's work from Gordon Parks. This is, of course, the film that is Shaft. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Shaft, at spine number 1130. And what we have here is, what I have here on the table here is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition. And so what that means is we have, and it's in this plastic casing, we have on the one side, we have the 4K UHD disc of Shaft. And then on this side, we have two discs, the Blu-ray discs. First is Blu-ray disc 1, and then second is Blu-ray disc 2. And I'll speak about those two Blu-ray discs as we get into the conversation about the supplements, and including the other film that's included, your Shaft's big score. But so we have the presentation of the film Shaft, 1971 Shaft, in the 4K UHD format on one disc, and then also the other option would be on Blu-ray disc 1. So just a word about the transfer, which can be found, information can be found in the insert, and this is a fold-out insert, and so I have taken the liberty of removing the insert prior to the start of this video recording. And according to the insert, it says about the transfer, and I quote, "Shaft is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. This new digital transfer was created in 16-bit 4K resolution from the 35mm original camera negative. Some footage that was damaged in the original camera negative had been replaced using a duplicate negative." And just going on, the original monaural soundtrack was remastered from the 2-inch 24-track dialogue, music, and effects magnetic track on the 4K Ultra HD disc. The feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR high dynamic range. On the Blu-ray, it is presented in high-definition SDR standard dynamic range. And I should point out too that there is an alternate uncompressed stereo soundtrack remastered with creative input from Isaac Hayes III. So, I was so excited when this release arrived at my doorstep, and so I watched the 4K disc. I watched it a number of times, first with the monaural soundtrack and then the alternate soundtrack on the 4K disc, and then I watched it on the Blu-ray disc, disc 1, in a similar fashion, and then a number of times after that too, just to get into it, because it's such a fun time. I have the Warner Brothers archive collection. This is the collection, which is not Criterion, but it's the one that has the 3 films: Shaft, Shaft's Big Score, and Shaft in Africa. And so it has it on the 3 separate discs that we have here. So this is this is what I had prior to the receipt of the Criterion 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. I must say that I absolutely adore this this presentation. Now, I'm not at all an expert when it comes to the release versions and the release history of Shaft. I never was. I wasn't lucky enough to have been able to see Shaft in the theaters in any type of theatrical presentation. Unfortunately, I wish I could, but I was never able to. So I can't have that as a frame of reference, unfortunately. But based on my very limited experience with theatrical release versions of this film, etc., and also Shaft's Big Score, by the way, I must say that from my vantage point, again, admittedly limited vantage point, yes, I thoroughly enjoyed this release. The 4K. The 4K presentation is being utilized in such a great and grand fashion here by Criterion, and here's another great example of this. So I was thoroughly enjoying this from start to finish, and the sounds too, the soundtrack. I mentioned the 2 soundtracks. I have to listen to the soundtracks a little bit more to get a feel for them and maybe the differences. So, but I would say that I tend towards maybe the monaural soundtrack, but both soundtracks were a very pleasant listening experience. That's for sure. That's for darn sure. So we have that, and also too the Blu-ray. I saw the Blu-ray version as well, and so I was very much taken with it. So this is for me a great experience, a great time at the movies, so to speak, either in the 4K disc for those who prefer that, or the Blu-ray disc for those who prefer that. So either way, you're going to have a great time, I think. I certainly did, and I look forward to further explorations and watching it again and again going forward. This is such a great film, so well done for being able to include it in this fashion. So now let us speak about the supplements that can be found. So once again, let me just show what we are talking about here. So we have, as per usual with other 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo releases from Criterion, we have many discs. The 4K UHD disc has the film Shaft, but it doesn't have any of the supplemental features, I think, due to compression, space limitations, etc. The supplements for the film Shaft can be found on the Blu-ray discs, and we have, as I say, 2 Blu-ray discs, Blu-ray disc 1 and Blu-ray disc 2. So let us focus on the supplements that can be found on Blu-ray disc number 1. Once again, Blu-ray disc number 1 has the film Shaft, the Blu-ray presentation of Shaft, plus the supplements that accompany this particular Blu-ray disc 1. So focusing in on Blu-ray disc 1, what do we have here? So first off, we have a documentary which is described as being from 2022, and it's called Revisiting Shaft. It's approximately 32 minutes, and we have so many people speaking being interviewed, talking about their recollections and their interpretations and their comments about the significance of this film, Shaft, revisiting Shaft, as the title says. Rael Combs, Raquel Gates, Nelson George, Shauna Redmond, Gordon Parks is also featured in terms of interview, archival footage, etc. So this is so great. Again, I mentioned how the Criterion Collection is really also emphasizing the socio-political and cultural phenomenal presence that is the film Shaft. And this documentary, this Revisiting Shaft documentary from Criterion, really goes so far to explain why that is, or present the reasons why that is, talking again about how this is a cultural phenomenon film, and how a lot of the comments here is about how Black identity, African American identity, is being encompassed and embodied in the character of Shaft, in the film Shaft, and also by virtue of Gordon Parks and his positioning in terms of the making of this film. And we have Gordon Parks and the importance of that too, with another great film called The Learning Tree, which is also a great Criterion release from some time back. If you haven't seen The Learning Tree by Gordon Parks, please check it out if you can. I think we have a video discussion on this channel about that. What a great film that is. But similar concerns and similar themes and similar interactions are going on here. And the idea, the way it's expressed here, the importance of this film in many aspects, one of which being the reorienting about how one saw Black identity expressed in this action adventure spectacle cinema. It's thoroughly entertaining cinema that is Shaft. And there's also an interesting discussion about the work Shaft and the emergence of sort of films around this time, which has been known as blaxploitation cinema. And there's a very fascinating discussion that is hinted at here, not just hinted at, but actually directly engaged in here and also elsewhere, as to the positioning and place that this film Shaft has in the context of blaxploitation cinema. Or to put it another way, is this film really considered, is this film a film that is an example of blaxploitation cinema? Or maybe it is not. Maybe it's separated from this concept of blaxploitation cinema, what that concept is. And also that concept is also touched upon somewhat briefly here in this conversation too. So this is a very important aspect of the discussion of the history of this film Shaft, how it figures into other films in the contemporary times, what it says to, what this says to, again, depictions of race and race relations and race identity, and also how, if at all, it figures into the context of blaxploitation cinema. And I do believe that there is a great and fascinating and really such an enriching and rewarding discussion as to perhaps it does or perhaps it doesn't. So this is and depending on how one answers that question, that leads to further intriguing and enlightening conversations to be had. So this is so great that this documentary touched upon that as well. I'm very, very impressed with this. And then going on, we have the discussion of the hero of Shaft, John Shaft, action hero who is confident on a physical level, on a level of his own sexuality, and his character. The character's sexuality is very much a key component of how he is portrayed in this film, and also social mobility. I tried to allude to this earlier in the discussion, but how there are various areas of New York City, various, say, communities, subgroupings, factions, when we're talking about the mob factions that are the rivals as well, but also various communities that are being portrayed here. But John Shaft is able to engage with, enter into, and really find a place within each of these communities in a very easy way, in a very smooth way. And this is, I think, hinted at, or this is an indicative point about mobility and social mobility. And this is also very important to show John Shaft being able to do this, which is, again, as a lot of the participants in this documentary might attest to, this is something that is actually quite innovative and very fresh when it comes to depictions of the character of John Shaft. So this is a very important thing. Also linked to that too, the idea of the depictions of New York City, visions of New York, or the landscape of New York during the early 1970s. Very, very important indeed. And also depictions in that way too of African American life and living. And this is also linked to, for example, something that I tried to mention earlier about the a reminder of the photography career and the artistic brilliance of Gordon Parks as a photographer, and how that has a sense of trying to capture the earnest nature of the real, what's going on, living life. And so this is also part of an indelible part of the look and feel of the work Shaft. And then the idea of Isaac Hayes and the indelible and critical and crucial role that the music plays, and how this is also further type of support, and also further enforcement and reinforcement of the brilliance of the establishment of this romantic hero, and in the context of African American culture and the like. So this is the whole package is right here. The look, the feel, the jacket is also spoken about here, to the mustache, how this is also such an iconic point as well. Depictions of African American culture, the way that intimate scenes are portrayed, sex scenes are portrayed here, and this is also something that is remarked upon. How this is, I think Raquel Gates, for example, mentions in the documentary how this is also showing how fresh this film Shaft is, because rarely did one see these types of intimate depictions, sex scenes of this nature, in a type of sort of big budget film like Shaft. And so this is a further indication of just how, say, groundbreaking this is, how important this film is as a type of film that is a social, a socio-political and cultural phenom, that has its own concerns, and it's also a type of statement or series of statements that are embedded and nuanced in a way that is also at the same time a great action, fist pumping type of adrenaline rush film to the max. And this is so important. This is so key. It is fun. It is entertaining. It is great. And so therefore, in that way, it is so many things at once. And so this documentary, Revisiting Shaft, goes so, it does such a brilliant job in reminding us of these points, teaching us of these points. And then after I watch this and going back to the film Shaft, I look at it with this perspective. Wow, what a great documentary this is. So please check it out if you can. It is called Revisiting Shaft. It is approximately 32 minutes. But then going on for the supplemental discussions for Blu-ray Disc 1, we have Soul in Cinema, filming Shaft on location. And this is described as being from circa 1971, approximately 10 minutes. And it does feature footage of Gordon Parks and Richard Roundtree shooting on location. And we have their discussions and their sort of on-the-spot interview footage, as it were. Also, we have scenes of Isaac Hayes and Gordon Parks working together, and we have the genesis, or the practice, or the rehearsal stage of some of the iconic music. The theme from Shaft is one of the most iconic pieces of music in cinema history ever. And so we have a little sense of that when we watch this Soul in Cinema filming on location, little supplement documentary. And it's we also see Hugh Robertson, the editor, and it's also mentioning directed by Hugh Robertson. So this is another great archival footage, historic. It shows the sort of the on the spot location with Gordon Parks and Richard Roundtree and others, and Isaac Hayes and others. So a great treat. Once again, please check it out if you can. Any chance one has to hear the words and see the rehearsal and the making of Gordon Parks, Richard Roundtree, Isaac Hayes, and others, go for it, my friends. Please watch it if you haven't already. This is brilliant. Then continuing on Blu-ray Disc 1 supplements, we have the BFI discussion with Richard Roundtree. This is described as being from 2010 at the National Film Theatre. This is approximately 12 minutes. And again, here we have Richard Roundtree, who is on stage in this theater, and there's a moderator discussion with him, and he is talking. There is such a genuine sense of a type of suave coolness that is on display here, just undeniable, and such a great chemistry, an aura. And he's speaking about, of course, getting the role, how it impacted his career, because it's such an iconic role. Isaac Hayes, Gordon Parks, etc. And he expresses it in this very, almost a lovely way, and just the manner and the sound of his voice, and the type of way that he's recalling in this earnest way these memories about the impact of this role and the film Shaft had on his career and indeed on his life. So this is a great another great way, or another great it's another great example of getting more Richard Roundtree. So any chance one can get to hear Richard Roundtree's comments, please take advantage of that chance, because it's great. So here's another of those chances here, the Richard Roundtree BFI discussion. Again, approximately 12 minutes. And then the fourth supplement on Blu-ray Disc 1 is described as being a 1974 episode from French TV Point Chaud, and this is focusing in on Isaac Hayes, 34 minutes. And here we have the discussion of Isaac Hayes' career and music philosophy, and also the rehearsal sessions and the work sessions, and also setting against the backdrop of, again, his iconic work with the film Shaft, or as known in French, Les Nuits Rouges de Harlem. So this is a great documentary. It's sometimes it's in the French language, sometimes it's in the English language. So you'll have that situation where sometimes we will hear Isaac Hayes' own comments in English, and then they might be translated by the interviewer in French later, or we might have a type of translation that is overlaid on the soundtrack, in which case for those like myself who I'm not fluent in French, so I'm not able to follow when that happens just by listening to the language, but there is the English subtitles that do appear for that. So in any event, here we have the great appreciation of the great work of Isaac Hayes. I mean, his work has been celebrated for across the world, and here's a great example of that, and for good reason, because it is landmark, it is iconic, it is it's some of the best stuff ever. So it's great to have this focus on the career and work methodology, and also the feel and the presence of Isaac Hayes. There's also that the presence of this artist. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Just the aura that is just coming off the screen as I watch this disc. It's just great. So here is the 1974 episode from French TV focusing in on Isaac Hayes, approximately 34 minutes. Please check this out as well if you can. And that's not all, because speaking of the sound, the next supplement on Blu-ray Disc 1 is called The Soul Sound, and this is from 2022, so it's a Criterion produced supplement. This is a one-on-one discussion with Shauna L. Redman, and it's approximately 12 minutes, and here we have discussions on the sound, the songs and the music and the landscape and the history and backdrop and significance of the way in which this film sounds and the feelings of those sounds and the music, as Sean L. Redman points out so brilliantly and so astutely. Sean L. Redman is so great. It's so great, and so whenever Sean L. Redman appears in any Criterion discussion or interview or supplement, please check it out immediately, because just like with this, you are going to get so much. I get so much out of those discussions, and I learn so much every single time. So here, Sean L. Redman, she touches upon aspects of the orchestrations in the music, soul. She mentions artists like Aretha Franklin, etc., Temptations, the Motown, gospel, and how this links to the way in which music is intertwined with the drama of the film Shaft as a type of chorus, back and forth, call and response type of interaction, which is itself too so brilliantly rendered in terms of an artistic design and philosophy. And speaking too about examples of the Soulsville, theme from Shaft, etc., how these speak to what's going on screen, while also expressing a type of inner monologue, while also even expressing a sense of a world building beyond that which we might we beyond that which we might be privy to directly on screen. Take the theme from Shaft, an example, which is great. There's a way in which we have the back and forth, almost chorus-like aspect of the female singers that are on that particular track, and also Isaac Hayes seemingly interacting with those singers as well as interacting with the image, and that interaction can be a deep parallel. It could also be a type of, say, separation, or it could be a type of intermal. It's so complex at once, and also there is an interesting subtle, or maybe not so subtle, maybe direct way in which this use of, say, the singers, the female singers, this also might have an indication of the sort of gender considerations in the world of the film Shaft, which is a very fascinating component. I never quite realized that until these supplement Criterion release supplement discussions, and so it's again another great example of how I'm really being I'm discovering new things, and when one speaks of this film Shaft, the music is one of the key components, and so we have a great guide here in the form of this discussion with Shauna L. Redman here, approximately 12 minutes. This is The Soul Sound, so please check this out as well if you haven't already. This is really brilliant. But it doesn't end there, because the supplements on Disc 1 continue with Styling Shaft. This is also from 2022, and this is with Joseph G. Alisi, who's the costume designer. This is approximately 15 minutes, and this is great. Again, speaking about the work Shaft's big score, his own background, Alisi's background in acting and theater, working with, let's say, Anne Roth, and then speaking about his work on Shaft and perceptions on the work Shaft. It operates in many ways like a film noir, like a James Bond film, and then its own thing, Shaft, John Shaft, how to express this character in the form of the costumes. This is, again, it was mentioned in the earlier Revisiting Shaft documentary, earlier in Disc 1, the idea of the look and the clothing and the turtleneck. There's a great discussion here about the choice behind the turtleneck, why that is. And you can't imagine it any other way. I mean, there was a discussion, maybe it could have been a shirt and tie, but no, it went for the turtleneck. They went for the turtleneck. It's great. We have the leather jacket and the different looks of leather and the leather clothing. And also there's a great discussion here with in the context of the cinematography, Urs Ferrer, and the way in which a lot of the scenes were shot with very low lighting. And so there are a lot of scenes shot with in the context of, say, nighttime scenes or shadow. And so at the same time, there are considerations in the costume choices, according to Lisi here, about how, given those circumstances of low lighting, there still needed to be the way to register visually the clothing that the viewer can see on screen. So the way in which, even with very minimal lighting, the way in which that minimal light could still reflect off of, say, the surface of leather, the leather coat or the leather jackets that Shaft is wearing at a time, or other fashion choices or costume choice designs. This is so fascinating and so cool to consider. And then it reminded me, yes, indeed, there are so many scenes shot during the nighttime and relatively low lighting, but we can still see what's going on. And the costume choices having a key component aspect to it. I never really put that together until this comment from Elise. So I'm learning so much in these details. Wow, this is great. So this documentary, or this discussion, I should say, Styling Shaft from 2022. This is approximately 15 minutes. And that's not all, because then rounding out the supplements on Blu-ray Disc 1, we have what's called promotional spots, and we have the trailer, and then we have the teaser, and then we have the radio spot. So Blu-ray Disc 1 is packed. It is packed. And as I mentioned, I learn so much whenever I am so fortunate to be able to explore the supplements on our Criterion release. This is a great example of that. I just mind blown in a lot of ways, and then watching these supplements and then going back to the film and then watching it and then appreciating it on these different levels. Wow, this is why Criterion is so great. So that is but just one portion, because we have a second disc that we will talk about momentarily. But up to now, we have been speaking about what we can find on Blu-ray Disc 1. Now, continuing on with the supplements section, let us go to the Blu-ray Disc 2, because as we mentioned, this release of Shaft has, for the Blu-ray component, 2 Blu-ray discs. We were just now speaking about Blu-ray Disc 1. Now let us focus our attention on Blu-ray Disc 2. So what do we have on said Blu-ray Disc 2? We have a number of things. First of all, let me just say that I'm removing the disc on the top here, and I'm seeing here Blu-ray Disc 2, which is, it says Shaft's Big Score. Now, Shaft's Big Score is the film from 1972. And this is also directed by Gordon Parks. It stars Richard Roundtree as Shaft, and also has Moses Gunn and also Julius Harris and others. And so this is, you're getting 2 films included with this Criterion release. So on the second Blu-ray disc, the main attraction on said disc number 2, Blu-ray disc number 2, is the 1972 sequel, Shaft's Big Score. So just very briefly about the film itself. The film is another Shaft film, and it is so exciting. I love Shaft's Big Score. I mean, there is a mystery about a mysterious death that occurs very, very early on, and that leads to this detective search, sleuthing into the what's known as the numbers racket, and also more turf, gangland war, factional fighting. And Shaft is right in the thick of things, as he always is, and there are action set pieces galore. There's this great interaction between his character and the character played by Julius Harris. Again, we saw a little bit of that, or a lot of that, in fact, in the earlier film Shaft. And now we have a continuation. This maybe uneasy relationship that John Shaft has with the public authorities. So, and then we have yet further dynamics of race and race relations that are depicted here. And also too the various say communities or boroughs of the city. So New York City is once again a landscape, and it's its own very important say character in the film in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of excitement. As I said, I love Shaft's big score, and I'm very glad it was included here as part of Blu-ray disc number 2. I should point out also a number of things that are very fascinating here. We have the music by Gordon Parks, and so this is so cool. I mean, the musical score is fantastic here. I mean, it was fantastic for Shaft and Isaac Hayes. Here it's fantastic for Shaft's big score and Gordon Parks. And again, it's a reminder too of just how wide-reaching the artistic genius of Gordon Parks is. You know, a true Renaissance artist. This was again, it's reminding us too of the Renaissance artist prowess extraordinaire of Gordon Parks that we saw in the film The Learning Tree, and we have it here as Shaft, and also Shaft's big score. So. And then the story is exciting, it's thrilling, it's engaging, it's entertaining. It is, and Richard Roundtree is, as per customary, magnificent, absolutely magnificent. So if you haven't seen Shaft's big score, this is a great opportunity to do so. If you enjoyed the film Shaft and you haven't seen Shaft's big score, I think you're in for a real treat. Again, I love this film so much. It's so great, and I'm very glad it's included as part of Blu-ray disc number 2. Now, before I go on, I should point out here that it would have been really great, in my view anyway. It would have been really great, even, I mean, this release is great, don't get me wrong, but it would have been made, I think, even better if, for example, the film Shaft's big score might have been given, say, its own release, or maybe this could have been, for example, it could have been a set which would have had 2 films like Shaft and Shaft's big score, and then say each would have been given its own spine number or something like that. I mean, we've seen sets like this before where you had say 2 or more films in a given release. You know, Police Story comes to mind, etc. So it would have been really cool if that happened, because that would have then given a lot of prominence to the greatness that is Shaft's big score. And it also is another great example of the filmography of Gordon Parks, too. So it would have been really cool if that had happened. Now, I don't know the specific rules and the decision-making process at Criterion for choosing which film, say, gets its own individual spine number treatment and which film gets the status of supplement. Because officially speaking, Shaft's big score here is, I think, being treated like a supplemental feature to this overall release of Shaft. Now, I would have preferred, personally, to have seen Shaft's big score given its own treatment as an individual release or combined individual release with the film Shaft. But and that would have given, again, prominence to that second film, which, as I say, is brilliant. So brilliant. Now, again, I can only speculate and guess as to why certain decisions are being made. I mean, a similar thing happened with the Once Upon a Time in China series, and there's a film there, Once Upon a Time in China and America, or the 6th film, that had a similar type of treatment. It seemed to have been being treated as a supplement, although when you look at the disc, it's given, it feels like its own individual release, but it's still being treated officially as a supplement. So I think a similar type of thing is happening here with Shaft's big score. And I can probably maybe speculate, maybe when compared to, say, the 4K treatment of the 1971 film, maybe there is a little bit of a noticeable quality difference when one looks at, say, Shaft's big score. Again, I'm speculating here, but to my eye and to my ear, the version that we have here on Blu-ray disc 2 of Shaft's big score is great. It's really wonderful, and it looks and feels and sounds great. I understand, I don't think we're talking about any new restoration here. That's my understanding. So we're not, so maybe in that reason, or for that reason, maybe we're talking about Shaft's big score not having its own spine number. But for my money, it looks and sounds great. I think even in this, say, quote-unquote current version that we have on Blu-ray disc 2, it could have been a great spy number 1131. But again, as the case happens, we still have it included as part of this overall package, and it's great to have, and it is another great example of Gordon Parks' filmography. It is another great continuation in the Shaft saga. It's yet a more opportunity to watch stories about John Shaft. So it's great to have it included here. So you're getting, again, two films for the price of one, in a manner of speaking. So there's that, again, on the Blu-ray disc, second Blu-ray disc. But then continuing on with the supplements, the other supplements that can be found on Blu-ray disc 2. Next up, we have Listen to a Stranger, an interview with Gordon Parks. This is described as being from circa 1973, approximately 19 minutes. And here we have a type of one-on-one interview discussion with Gordon Parks himself. And any chance one has to watch any type of interview or listen to an interview with Gordon Parks, please take it. Please take it. This is, as I mentioned before, an artist extraordinaire, a Renaissance artist extraordinaire, and to listen to his the details of his life and his biography, and he talks about, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and talking about being working as a waiter on the trains, and how this enabled him a number of things. But one of the things from his vantage point is he got to appreciate what he calls the beauty of faces, the visage of human beings, the wisdom that he identifies, that has a direct correlation excuse me, with his work in photography. And though there's already a sense of, how should I put it, grace and respect, and a type of wisdom and peace you can sense in the words of Gordon Parks. It is, and also there's a sense of there's grace and the humble nature of his comments, while at the same time showing just what a genius Gordon Parks is. So, and then he talks here about the personal and individual, race relations and depictions of race, his work with Life magazine, which I've mentioned before, and also his work with the brilliant, emotional and powerful work called The Learning Tree, and talking about the still photography, and then going back to The Learning Tree, and then comparing that to say his work in other areas of cinema, Shaft being an example, a very successful, financially successful example at that. So all in all, this is a great chance. If you if you haven't seen it already, please check out this interview discussion with Gordon Parks. Again, it's called Listen to a Stranger, an interview with Gordon Parks, approximately 19 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have, again, on Blu-ray disc number 2, A Complicated Man, The Shaft Legacy. And this is described as being from 2019. It is divided into 3 parts, and totaling overall 44 minutes. So the total running time, 44 minutes. Within that total running time, we have 3 separate parts that you can go into. And it's focusing in on the legacy of Shaft, also touching upon the Shaft franchise, because there have been a number of films that have been made about this character Shaft, or about the legacy of this character of Shaft, shall we say. So the 3 parts are, the first part, A Bad Mother Born, and then the second part is No Questions Asked, and the third part is A Legend in His Time. So going to the first part here, talking about the character of Shaft, how he is cool with everybody, as one of the interview participants mentioned. He's able to navigate different spaces and different environments. We mentioned this earlier about his the mobility, strength of this character, as mentioned in the Revisiting Shaft supplement from Blu-ray disc number 1, and also talking about the Ernest Tyndman book, and also speaking about the parallels and the sort of the timing with the release of this film Shaft, and also the film Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, Melvin Van Peebles' work as well. And so there are some interesting parallels. There are also some interesting distinctions that can be made between those two very distinctive works, and also returning now to the work Shaft, Gordon Parks, and also how this is an action film, and it is also a film that is very much dealing with and discussing aspects of civil rights in the United States. and talking about the emergence of the great Richard Roundtree here, the costume, the creating, the look, and the aesthetic, and the feel of the character of Shaft, etc. So for these and other reasons, here's a great part one of this Shaft Legacy documentary from 2019. And next, part two is No Questions Asked, and here we have more details about the story, the styling, the cool, supremely cool, defiant, confident man that is Shaft. The leather jacket, the mustache is mentioned here. Uh, Depicting New York City, that type of grittiness that is captured in the cinematography of the time. Again, it also reminds us of other examples from the early 1970s cinema, French Connection, etc. And then also there are some moments of Gordon Parks in the studio with Isaac Hayes. This would have been seen in the other supplement, for example, which is from disc one, which is Soul in Cinema, which is that sort of archival on the spot or on location archival footage. By the way, that archival Soul in Cinema documentary or short documentary can be found on the disc of Shaft as part of the supplements that, for example, are part of this Warner release that I have here. But you can get those clips that are intercut into this second part of this Shaft Legacy omnibus documentary here. And then talking about Isaac Hayes and the Oscars and the impact that Isaac Hayes' music had on the Oscars and the performance and the what he wore when he performed on the Oscar stage, etc. And then the financial success of the film going forward. So this is the second part of this legacy documentary. Then the third part, A Legend in His Time, speaks about the influence of the film on other films during this period. Sort of heroes emerging, maybe similar to that of John Shaft, and other films in the Shaft series, and also the TV show as well that's mentioned. And then there's talk here about Shaft's big score and how in many ways it feels like it's upping the ante in a manner of speaking in terms of the suspense, in terms of the story structure, in terms of the action set pieces. Once again, the action set pieces in Shaft and Shaft's big score. Wow, amazing stuff. And then also there's talk about Shaft in Africa, which is described by the participants, interview participants here, maybe as a type of it wasn't necessarily for a lot of people reaching the same heights as, say, Shaft and Shaft's big score, and maybe a lot of that might have had to do with, one might feel, the sense of studio influence and interference, in a manner of speaking, with a film like Shaft in Africa. We don't have Gordon Parks on the director's chair anymore with Shaft in Africa and the like. But that is also a reminder too of just what a position Gordon Parks must have been in terms of being in the director's chair for those first two films, and then trying to maneuver that in terms of his artistic vision on the one hand, and also trying to essentially handle the sort of Hollywood machine on the other, and doing it in such a successful way. I mean, you see it in films like Shaft and Shaft's big score. And so this is, I think, indicative of just how brilliant Gordon Parks as an artist really is. And so there we have a discussion of the legacy of the films in the Shaft series, and then going on into the other films, the recent films, and how those fit into the Shaft legacy in a manner of speaking. So wonderful stuff. This is a great documentary or series, documentary omnibus, 3 parts totaling 44 minutes. So please check it out if you can. It's really great. And next, on Blu-ray disc number 2, we have a supplement which is described as being from 2022, approximately 25 minutes, with Kinohi Nishikawa and Walter Mosley. They're being interviewed separately, but their interviews are edited together in this 25-minute supplement, which is called John Shaft and the Black Detective Tradition. This is, again, one of the great highlights of the supplements of Criterion releases over 2022 so far. This is so brilliant. I mean, so far the supplements and the overall release of this work, just one of the greats of 2022 so far. And one of the reasons for that is supplements like this. I cannot express to you enough just how much I love this supplement here. These they talk about John Shaft, the character of John Shaft, and the literary tradition, noir detective tradition in literary fiction, the black detective, African American detective depictions and characters in literary traditions here, depictions of masculinity, black masculinity, and how this is also finding its influence in the literary traditions of the past. And so hard-boiled detective archetypes from the late 1950s and 60s. Chester Himes, Coffinhead Johnson, Gravedigger Jones, etc. So these are archetypes of what ended up becoming the character of Shaft, both on page and on screen. We have so many discussion points of the literary traditions described here by, for example, Nishikawa, the pulp fiction, Holloway House from California, Iceberg Slim, Donald Goines, and also depictions here of not just the detective characters themselves, but also the environments and the stories and the settings that we're seeing in a lot of this sort of Holloway House pulp fiction tradition. For example, what's described as the so-called pimp life or the so-called drug life, and how this had a very significant component in this type of, say, literary tradition, because rather than look upon it in a type of negative way or as a type of, say, in a way that had a type of maybe moral-based disapproval in that way. On the contrary, this was another setting. This was another, say, world and environment, and a series of characters that were depicted in these earnest and very engaging storytelling ways. And so this is a very, very important component. Again, expressions of many aspects of humanity across many spectrums indeed. So to have these aspects highlighted in the literary traditions and to have them discussed here in this really great and honest way, I'm learning so much all the time here. And this goes into a discussion of Ernest Heidemann, and in terms of the work Shaft, and then goes into how this work was then adapted into, with certain similarities, but also certain changes to the cinematic form that is the Gordon Parks film from '71, Shaft. And so then we have a great discussion here about doubles and reflections, and there's this type of mirror imagery that's going on, and oftentimes John Shaft is seen as being the double reflected off of certain images, etc. There is a really keen point that is raised here about how this is a reflection, or could be interpreted to be a reflection, of what is termed double consciousness of a black identity, W.E.B. Du Bois, and this idea of a divided sense of self, and how this is expressed in the context of John Shaft. And indeed, we see John Shaft, it's mentioned here, social mobility, being able to maneuver in different contexts, different communities, different spaces within New York City. But he's also confronted with a certain degree of, say, racist attitudes, and also there is a pressure from the black community and certain characters within the black community. There's accusations against Shaft using phrases like Uncle Tom, etc. But how John Shaft is able to interpret that, or to maybe to counter that, or to really stand against that, whatever forms that is, because again, depending on the community and world that he finds himself in, the pressures against him are quite different, potentially speaking. And so we have, therefore, this being discussed in the context of what is being raised here about double consciousness, and what is being expressed versus what might be ultimately being felt. This is such a profound thing, and this is something that I learn about so much, and you see it in these very quick and very, almost, they seem to be maybe in many respects almost like throwaway lines in a lot of the scenes in Shaft, but you look at it through this lens and you realize, my goodness, this is filled with so much impact, so much meaning. Even these split second lines of dialogue that come and go in an instant, they mean so much. So again, wow. And then also various aspects of African American culture, for example, expressed in, if we look at the first film, one character, one of the key characters, Buford on the one hand, or Bumpy on the other hand, they seem to be representing different, say, philosophies of dealing with this idea of the social consciousness. And so, and then the idea of the everyday experiences of Chester Himes, etc., and how the everyday experiences as expressed in the literary tradition seem to have its own echo in the way in which Gordon Parks is trying to express the everyday experiences through the photography lens. And so this supplement is utterly, utterly, utterly brilliant. Please check it out if you can. I have seen it a number of times. I learn something new every time. I try to take notes as much as possible, try to get down everything as much as possible. So I just keep watching it over and over again. So please check it out if you can. This is John Shaft and the Black Detective Tradition, approximately 25 minutes. And next, continuing on with Blu-ray Disc 2, we have Behind the Scenes, Shaft's Big Score. This is approximately 9 minutes. This is similar to the On the Location footage supplement that we saw in Blu-ray Disc 1 here. This time for Shaft's Big Score, dealing with a scene involving a car chase and a stunt person and or stand-in, and Gordon Parks and Richard Roundtree also being giving on-the-spot discussions or interviews. For example, Richard Roundtree is talking about his career and what kinds of roles he would like to try to approach and handle, and he's talking about maybe wanting to do a love story type of role, which is it's always great whenever one has a chance to hear the comments from Gordon Parks and Richard Roundtree. So and also we get a little bit of the outdoor location setting here for Shaft's Big Score. So please check this out if you can. It's really great. Approximately 9 minutes. And then the supplements are rounded out on Blu-ray Disc 2 with the trailer again. So wonderful stuff. So Blu-ray Disc 2 can be said to be the disc about Shaft's Big Score. I've already mentioned about it would have been nice to have that film as its own spine number, but be that as it may, what we have here, again, you're getting 2 films for the price of 1, and you're getting a whole set of supplements on such second Blu-ray disc. So what are you waiting for? I mean, this is great stuff. Again, what a great release from Criterion indeed. I should point out just a number of things here too before we move to the final component of this video discussion, which is I've been mentioning this earlier release that I have, this non-Criterion release I have here. Now, one of the things that this Criterion collection release does not have is it doesn't have, for example, Shaft in Africa. It doesn't have any of the other Shaft films that we have seen with Samuel L. Jackson as an example. So that's something to consider if you are looking to be a completist when it comes to the series of films of Shaft. But it does have that sense of focusing, and one can say, on the Gordon Parks work of Shaft. In that way, one can say it is a complete form in terms of the Gordon Parks filmography, in a manner of speaking, in the Shaft universe. So if depending on how one thinks about it, there's it. Also, maybe, again, how one feels about a film, about the films in the series, for example, Shaft in Africa, that might figure into your decisions about how you want to approach the series, or you might feel that having a release like the Criterion release here alone is enough. And believe me, I totally understand if you feel that way, because it is one of the best this year, I feel. So you're getting so much as it is, and it's a focus on Gordon Parks, and so in that way you're getting, from that vantage point, I think, a complete package in that perspective. But just know that there are other options out there, just in case you're interested. Also, I should point out too that one of the great things about this non-Criterion release of Shaft that I have is it had on the disc of Shaft, it also had a supplement which was an episode of the TV series. And here in Criterion's release, I didn't find any TV episode or anything of the sort. It would have been so cool if that had been included, but again, because we know that Shaft, the legacy of Shaft, the franchise of Shaft also existed in TV form as well. So it would have been nice to have had maybe an example here and there of the TV form. As far as I understand it, we don't have anything like that, unfortunately, but if you are interested in that, there are other options available too, again, if you're interested. But be that as it may, one more time, to regard this Criterion release would be as the celebration of the Shaft films in the hands of the filmography and cinematic and artistic legacy of Gordon Parks. And in that perspective, what we're getting here is really it's brilliant. So just wanted to mention that before we move on. Now, one of the things too is we should focus on the leaflet, the insert, the fold out. Now, I wish that this could have been a staple booklet, and so I'm not a fan of the fold out format, as I've mentioned before, but that does not take away from the great essay that's included here. This is Amy Abugo Ongiri's Power Moves. Wow, what a great essay this is. So Power Moves. Once again, I would suggest watching the films, Shaft, and yes, Shaft's big score, and then you can read this great essay, Power Moves. It's a wonderful essay to have here. Again, further elaboration, further discussion of the themes and points and cultural significance of the Gordon Parks films here. So a wonderful essay to be included here, that's for sure. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the great artwork here that we have on display. Bill Sienkiewicz, the artwork here, the illustration, art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Siegelman, illustration Bill Sienkiewicz here for Shaft. Wow, this is so cool. It has that great use of the color palette and almost the retro design, which is so in keeping with the 1970s aesthetic look and feel. And it has that great, all-encompassing look that is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And that look carries on into the fold out here. So I mentioned my misgivings about the fold out format, but that does not take away at all from the brilliance of the artwork here. So well done for this. This is so cool indeed. I should say too that we have this artwork that is also included or continued on into the interior parts of this release, the case here. So great. It would have been cool if this had been in a digipack format. I am a fan of the digipack format, and maybe the digipack form might have allowed for maybe some handling and treatment, alternative handling and treatment regarding Shaft's big score that I alluded to earlier in this discussion. But be that as it may, I'm totally okay with the plastic casing. You know, we've seen it before with the one side having one disc and then the other side having the two discs, which are layered in a way they don't touch. So that's okay with me. But it's always nice to think about these possibilities that could have occurred. Be that as it may, or given that consideration, we have this great release from Criterion. I've tried to emphasize what I think are its strengths, and it does have its weaknesses too. I do acknowledge that, but I think its strengths totally outnumber the weaknesses by an exponential form. So you're dealing with a real classic release here. I would strongly suggest getting this if you haven't already. This is one of the best, one of the greats indeed, of a great film. The great legacy of Gordon Parks is alive and well in releases like this from Criterion. This is the work Shaft, which also includes, my dear friends, Shaft's big score. So Shaft and Shaft's big score you're getting in this great package. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including Shaft and Shaft's big score. And so until we meet again, please take very good care of yourselves. And until we see each other again, thank you and cheers.